I froze my psycho neighbor out of her apartment. In college, my two friends and I decided to find a place together off campus. We found a beautiful 3-bedroom house with surprisingly affordable rent. The basement of the house was listed as a separate apartment, but as it had a separate entrance and the indoor stairwell had been blocked off, we weren't worried. And the thermostat was upstairs. So the demon neighbor moved in. From upstairs, we could hear everything. This adult woman would call her mother and scream at her to pay for her cell phone bills and give her grocery money, aka Taco Bell and cheap tequila. She would scream at whatever guy she was sleeping with to bring her meth, and one day she brought home 3 puppies to scream at too. We were terrified of this woman and the noise was hell. Also, we've been idiotic enough to sign a lease stating we were responsible for all utilities, period. Meaning we were now financing her gas, water, and electric. But with only 2 months left on the lease, we thought we could just ride it out. But then she started smoking. Constantly. According to the landlord, she would quit for good when she signed the lease, but for good only lasted 2 days. Since it was winter, the heat was running nearly 24/7 and the smoke was wafting up from the vents. Our apartment and all our belongings began to reek with smoke. We contacted the landlord because we'd signed for a bloody non-smoking apartment. He told us we live in a state where you could technically call an apartment non-smoking even if it's shared ventilation with a smoking apartment. At this point, my 2 roommates were heading out for a 2-week vacation. They were online students while I was residential, leaving me alone in the apartment with the demon smoker in the basement. I couldn't sleep or eat because my idiotic stomach decided to react to all the secondhand smoke by aching and cramping constantly. After 3 days, I was a little insane. I made a plan. I checked the forecast, lows in the 20s all week. I borrowed a friend's ultra insulated sleeping bag. I bought one of those ski masks with the holes for your eyes and mouth. I got out my stocking cap, my silk long underwear, my woolen socks, and down parka. I bought tea, hot cocoa, and ramen and prepared to live off a diet of hot liquids. And I turned off the effing heat. Day 1. She's screaming at her mother for forcing her to move into this frozen shithole of an apartment. Day 2. She's screaming at her boyfriend, meth dealer, because he won't let her move in with him. Day 3. She's screaming at the landlord about how she's fucking freezing. Day 4. The landlord is at my door. I greet him in full ski mask, parka, stocking cap array, looking like I'm heading out to rob Santa Claus at the North Pole. He asks me if I don't find it a little chilly in the house. I reply I would find all the cigarette smoke a little warm. Day 5, she is screaming about the bitches upstairs to anyone who will listen, and I'm sitting upstairs clutching my car keys and my pepper spray with 911 typed into my phone. She finally decides she's fucking leaving and moving in with Greg, even though he just got out for stabbing Travis and he's living in that fucking creepy house in the woods with all those assholes biting dogs. Day 6, she's gone. I silently bless Greg. Moral of the story, there's a bloody reason the rent seems too good to be true. Slumlord lost his business over $300 security deposit. I rented a little house from a man who owned a painting business. The power was off when we came to see the property, but he assured us everything worked. Even put it in the contract. The place was dirty and poorly maintained, so we negotiated the security deposit down to $300. Turned out the heat, air didn't work, along with the refrigerator and dishwasher. I asked him to have someone look at them. He cursed me up and down. He called and left threatening voicemails. He would show up unannounced and let himself in. On one of the visits, I showed him that the crawl space was flooded and was a breeding ground for thousands, if not millions of cockroaches and mosquitoes that would come up through the floor vents. There was absolutely no ductwork, even though he claimed that the heat air worked fine. He accused me of causing the flood myself, even though I showed him the source was a pipe that has rusted through. He refused to address any problems and said, if you don't like it, then you can move. You can't pay for a bargain and expect to live in the Ritz. This man was a terrible man in general. Once he hired someone off Craigslist to cut down a tree in the rental property's yard. The man worked literally all day for the agreed $150, cut up and hauled off the tree. He came back that evening, just standing in the yard. I asked if I could help him. He said he was waiting for the owner to get paid. The owner kept replying saying he was on the way, but never showed up. Our neighbor told us he had punched the previous renter in the face and refused to pay him for a day's work for his company. He had bragged about renting to illegal immigrants and not having to do anything because they wouldn't sue. We had a newborn baby, so we called his bluff and agreed to find a new place to live. We left the home in a much better shape than we found it. He said he would mail us the security deposit, but never did. He dodged my phone calls until one day he called to say, "You aren't getting it back. You broke the contract when you left early, so go F yourself." I was really upset because we were new parents and had very little money. That $300 was a big deal to us and a drop in the bucket for this man. He owned an upscale painting business and had 15 rental properties. The next week, I was online leaving negative reviews for his business when I clicked a link and noticed his website's domain had just lapsed. I knew what I had to do. I immediately bought it, then created a homepage with a contact info for his biggest competitor. I emailed him from his old domain, asking him if he wanted to buy the website for $320, the cost of the security deposit plus the price I paid for the domain. He was irate. He started calling my work, threatening to sue my employer. He even contacted my parents and threatened to sue them. He left a bunch of threatening voicemail for me, saying he was going to beat me up and he knows where I live and he has my social security number. I received emails from several review sites asking if I was trying to update the contact info for the business. He must have used his old domain email as his contact email. I didn't want to get in trouble for impersonating his business, so I did not respond. The contact info was never changed. I received a few emails from potential clients. I called him and told him about the painting job request. I gave him the contact info for one of the clients to prove I wasn't just making it up. I told him it was the last time I was going to do that for him and suggested he buy the website back in order to not miss out on any other jobs. He told me he was taking me to court. I told him I had recorded his threatening phone calls and saved all his texts and voicemails. He said he was going to sue me for illegally recording him, not illegal in my state. I said I look forward to seeing you in court where I countersue you and press charges for harassing me, and I hung up. He called back, cussed me out for hanging up on him. I said, "Call me back when you can speak respectfully to me," and hung up again. We repeated this about 5 times. Each time he was more angry until the last time he spoke respectfully and explained he hadn't got a single job in months. I suggested he focus more on creating a website to find business. He lost it and cussed me out again. 6 months passed and he still hadn't bought the website from me. I get a call from him begging me to do the right thing and give him the website back. I told him the current price was $350. 6 months later, I get another phone call. I told him the current price is $380. Eventually, he texted me to say, "I went out of business. I hope you're happy." I responded, "I hear having a website really helps your business. $380 and it's yours." He told me what a terrible person I am and said, "Karma's a bitch." I responded, "Maybe if you stop trying to rip people off, your karma wouldn't be so bad." That was the last time I ever heard from him. The major business listing sites confirmed his business did indeed close. I renewed the domain for another 2 years just in case he was bluffing. A few months later, I drove by his office to see if it was still there. It was empty with a for rent sign posted. I never got that $300 back and spent money on domain registrations, but it was totally worth it. Height approved. It was about 25 years ago, so I was about 8, and we had just moved into a 115-old house that was in need of major repairs. My dad, thinking ahead, knew he would need a large garage workshop to really get started on the renovations properly. On the edge of our yard was an ancient barn that was falling apart and needed to be torn down. My dad figured this was the best place to build his new workshop, so that was the plan. We had met and were on good terms with all the neighbors at that point. When the plans for the new workshop were finished, my parents went around to all neighbors as a courtesy to show them the plans and get their blessing. The neighbors whose property the current barn and new workshop would border, I will call them the Peters, were concerned about the height. The existing barn was 16 high and they asked if we could only build it 1 story, 12 max, as to not block the sun in their yard. Sure, no problem. My parents agreed. They wanted to go 2 stories for extra storage, but just 1 wasn't a deal breaker. So the old barn was torn down and the foundation laid for the new one. During that time, there was a falling out with the Peters and my parents. I'm not sure what happened, but it turned nasty. One day, my brother and I were playing street hockey, and Mr. Peters came out yelling at us, "Get off the road, you half-breed shits!" My dad is black, so we're both half black. "You'll have to earn your place in this town." Upon hearing this, my mom had to physically restrain my dad from going over and beating the living shit out of him. Eventually, he cooled off and started on his plan. The plans for one story went out the window. Soon, the new garage that was only supposed to be one story soon gained a second in the blueprints. If they were going to direct racist comments at his kids, my dad would build what he wanted. As construction started, the Peters came over to ask why there was two-story being built and were told to go fuck themselves. We didn't hear from them again until the roof started to go on. The bylaws of the township limited all out structures to 24 high. The Peters called the township and then a building inspector, claiming that the new garage was over the 24 high. If it was over height, the entire thing would have to be torn down and rebuilt, costing us tens of thousands of dollars. I remember the Peters standing there watching the inspector with smug looks on their faces. 2 days later, we got the final report back from the township and the inspector, 23 feet 11 inches, just as my dad had drawn up in his new plans. He sent me up on the roof of the garage, just plywood, no shingles yet, with some spray paint and had me write 23 feet 11 inches, height approved, in 2-foot high neon orange letters across the entire roof, facing their yard and house. Not only did the garage block all sunlight from reaching their yard, but my dad waited until everything else was done before he shingled that side of the roof. They had to stare at those neon orange letters for almost 3 years. We didn't hear a peep from them for the next 10 years until they moved. So those were the stories for today's video. If you enjoyed this and want to watch more videos, then click here for more stories, or go check out the info card in the right hand corner for more videos.